Well, thank you for joining us this morning. This is something that I have worked on and thought and talked a lot about in recent weeks, and I'm very excited to announce today that the House Republicans are going to create, under my direction, a new committee, a select committee for technology and responsive government. I think we have such so many computer systems and so many ways that our citizens interact with state government, and I think we have so many opportunities to improve that, to shorten the amount of time it takes in those interactions, to make that a more customer service oriented process, and to use technology to make it not only more efficient, but also more effective. So those are the goals of this committee. We're going to reach out to House Democrats today and ask for their members that they would like to have participate in this process. I'm very excited to announce that Dave Baker, one of our members, obviously a small business owner and a member from Wilmer, Minnesota, will be chairing this committee, and we really have selected someone who I think he would say himself is not an IT expert, and that's really not what this is about. It is more about customer service and making sure that we're running things more efficiently and more effectively. And having somebody who's not so technology focused, but yet somebody who is in business himself, a small business owner, somebody who's in the hospitality business and understands very personally what customer service means, I think is someone who will have a much better opportunity to make a better and bigger impact on what we do in state government. So I'll turn it over to Dave. He can talk a little bit, and then we can take some questions.
Thank you. Again, good morning. My name is Dave Baker. Really honored to have been asked by the Speaker to take on this challenge of trying to make sure that when citizens are touching the government somehow, that we can try to make it better and faster. I'm a small business guy, like the Speaker said, and I know what it's like to run a restaurant and run a hotel. And so when we look at those kinds of things, we want to make sure we're reactive. And I think that this is like a big business, a huge business, but it's something that we want to make sure is better, and we look at things from the outside once in a while. I'm still a newcomer here. I'm still just a few weeks out of my freshman season, and I want to make sure that I still have eyes wide open to how we can do things different. And I ran on more efficient government, faster, more nimble. And I think this is a good thing for me to try to take on. And I'm really excited that this is something that the Speaker and I don't want to just come up with some optics here. We want to actually do some things that work. And we hope that we can take the next several weeks, next several months, and do some things that we'll all be able to look back here and see we were doing some good things with this initiative. So I'm super proud to be a part of this committee. I can't wait to get our committee folks on the team and ready to show our leadership what we can do with good listening skills and how we can actually implement and launch this new thing we want to do here with more efficient government. So with that, we'll take some questions, I guess, right?
If you look at MNLARS, that's taken a lot of money. If you look at some of the health systems, that's taken a lot of money. Won't money be necessary to make government?
Potentially, but I think what we want to do is and my direction to Chair Baker is to basically look at how our departments interact with each other, take a look at where the most visible interactions are from the public to state government and how we can improve those. I think if you look at MNLARS, this is a great example of what's wrong with state government. We've been working on this now for 8 years. We are, 150 or 200% over budget. And state government is writing a computer program to do something that is commercially available. And frankly, think of over the last 8 years how many times the private sector has flipped technology to where you would have a completely different solution. And here we are still chasing the same thing that frankly still isn't ready for prime time. Will it take some money? It probably will take some up front. This isn't really about that. This isn't a finance committee. It doesn't have a budget. This committee will look into how we can make improvements and make recommendations to our other committees. My expectation is that if you look at the work that this committee would do and the work that they would recommend over the course of 2 budget cycles or 5 years or 6 years, 3 budget cycles, it will save the state of Minnesota money. But not just will it save money, will it make government run more efficient, we also know that we need to make it more effective. We need to improve our customer service to our constituents and make sure that we're serving them, and remember that process in everything that we do. So we hope the customer, the citizen of Minnesota, will drive everything that we do through this committee, and hopefully it'll be a lens that we can kind of put ourselves in their shoes.
What are some of the problems that the customers are having with interfacing with technology, with getting fishing licenses, with taxes? What are the problems that you see here?
I think whether they're ongoing problems, again, I think the speaker used Minlars as a good example. We know we have to improve this. Our websites are getting better all the time, but they're also an enormous amount of silos, and I think that we just need to look at, are they building their own on their own? I'm looking forward to seeing the Minute strategic plan here coming up with what they've been working with, but I think it's a matter of just finding out what else can we do what are the citizens saying about this? Because they do say many times, I can't find this online. It might be there, but it's not a simple touch and go kind of a system. I think the formats and the platforms can be simplified. I think they can be streamlined, and I think that, again, as the speaker said, our goal is to, over time, make it friendlier, but it's got to save, we think, money in the long run for the state of Minnesota. So we've just, different things, we can talk about the MNsure all day long, about how the complex of that system but it also has opened up our eyes for the rest of the system, and how can we better maintain that and better kind of look at it from an outsider's view, how we can make it better. Yep.
Yeah, I mentioned to the governor a couple of weeks ago when I spoke with him in person that we were going to be rolling out this initiative. I don't think it was any surprise to anyone. I talked about it in my speech right after I was elected speaker. I've talked about it numerous times since. This is something I've been thinking about and wanted to do even 2 years ago. But as a new speaker and jumping right into a budget cycle, it was more difficult to look at the longer range things. This really is kind of a long range thing. When I spoke with the governor, I told him, this isn't intended to be something negative or being critical of what we've done in the past, but to be a more positive, forward-looking committee that will look at how can we, use efficiencies in how departments interact with each other, and how can we use technology to make the services that we provide to Minnesotans be more efficient, but also more effective. How can we improve the process, but also find efficiencies? And those are the questions and the problems that the private sector deals with every day. They don't get to go to the taxpayers and say, I don't know what the governor's number was yesterday, but we just need $146 million more to do this. They have to find it in the resources that they have. And every time the private sector has to use technology and use a better customer service process to do things better and do them more efficient and more effective. And there are a lot of private sector solutions out there that we know that we could have adopted probably 2 or 3 times over for what we have spent on MNLARS. And other states have already done this. We don't need to recreate the wheel. We don't need to, the state of Minnesota isn't and shouldn't be in the computer programming business. We should be in the business of issuing driver's licenses and issuing property tax refunds. We shouldn't be in the business of writing computer programs. I think we've had some pretty colossal failures over the last few years that would dictate that I think maybe the private sector has figured some of this stuff out better, and they can do it more efficiently and more effectively. So we'll look at some of those solutions.
Well, in regard to what we did hear from the administration yesterday about their request for cybersecurity and for computer upgrades, would that request come to this committee, and what is your caucus's view of that request?
Not specifically. This committee may look at cybersecurity, but kind of as it relates to the other things that this committee will deal with. And this committee will deal with how do the different departments interact with each other on a kind of higher level. But each one of our committees already deals with their specific areas. Frankly, state government finance will deal with MIN-IT and the cybersecurity issues. So this one will probably touch on it at a high level, but that will not be the focus of this committee. As far as the governor's proposals, I think one of the reasons for putting together a committee like this is because in today's day and age, when you can do anything that you want on your smartphone, people demand an easier, better way of interacting with everything in their life, from getting a cup of coffee to ordering their lunch to an Uber to getting a driver's license or paying their taxes. And I think state government has been a little slow in adapting and using technology in the way that the private sector has. So, you know, we obviously want to have that higher level. If you think of how many interactions using technology that state government has with its citizens, it's literally potentially in the thousands. We want to have a higher level committee that looks at all of those and how they interact with each other and how we can do that better but more efficiently.
What kind of government services would you like to see citizens be able to access with their smartphones, for
Well,
instance?
it can be as easy as something related to a driver's license or tabs, making that process easier. You know, one of the most difficult, maybe lowest customer popularity things that people do is go to the DMV, right? So making those processes run a little bit smoother and using technology to make that easier. Now, we have made some strides, but obviously we're not doing it as well as we could, and I think that's one example. There are some others that you know, when folks are receiving services from the county, the computer systems where the county carries out a lot of the state services, whether it be welfare or healthcare benefits, making those systems run more effectively and more efficiently. Counties have a lot of expense in employees to use and operate and run these antiquated systems. And frankly, if we could make that system run a little bit better and more efficiently, it would not pass those. So this isn't just saving the state money, but in that instance, it would save the county money. One of the ones that we hear about the most is our eligibility software, that we don't have a good process for determining eligibility for folks for state programs. And there's such a need for that. I mean, it's come up in just recently in the bill that we passed, House and Senate File 1, you know, determining, we didn't have the ability to determine if people, you know, income eligibility to say that, you know, high income folks wouldn't get this relief. We just don't have the ability to do that. If we had a better system, it would allow us the flexibility to be able to do that sort of thing. And if we can make that process run a lot quicker and a lot smoother, hopefully folks' time that they spend interacting with someone in a county office could be cut in half or less. So those aren't you know, super visible things like going to the DMV and cutting the time at the DMV in half, but we should look at it across all state services. And some of them may not be as glamorous as others, but yeah, jump in.
I wanted to just pop into that. I actually had a town hall meeting last night, and it was very heavily focused on healthcare. And one of the women mentioned that her son had been diagnosed with somewhere on the autism spectrum, high-functioning autism, but that she'd spent weeks and weeks and weeks trying to advocate for him. And she'd call one place, and they'd say, well, maybe you should call here, and then she'd call there, and they'd say, well, you need to go here, and then she'd call somewhere else. And so I think that's part of the issue too, just helping people even navigate through the system. I think we need to look at that and find out how we can get different agencies, different programs that it's clear as to how to help people navigate through the system. And I heard that, and we probably had 30 people there, and a good portion of them had similar stories with how difficult it had been navigating through state government generally, not knowing where to go, not having an advocate to be able to help them. And so I think there's a lot of things that we could look at.
Couple questions on the examples you just gave. I just renewed my tabs, and I renewed them online, and it took me about 5 minutes.
I did too yesterday.
So how hard was it for you? Because it wasn't hard for me.
It was not, but see, that's one example of where we do it well. How does the MNLARS system now affect that? And, you know, I mean, we also have a situation where folks can, if you buy a new vehicle, get a title through the normal process, or you can pay, you know, $20 or $30 to get it expedited, and you get it in a week. Otherwise, it takes a month or 6 weeks. Well, what are we doing differently from the month to 6 weeks that we are in a week? Or is that just another opportunity for state government to charge another revenue source? They probably have exactly the same process. It's just that we've allowed Minnesotans to pay extra money so the state can get more revenue. And my guess is we don't do anything differently. So do the people who don't pay the $30 really deserve to have to wait 6 weeks to get their title? I mean, there are examples of things that government does very well where we've adapted and used technology. But we need to look at that across all of state government and make sure that we're being as effective and efficient and frankly, good stewards of the tax dollars that we have.
And then on the eligibility, Governor Pawlenty actually started a computer project on eligibility. It cost millions upon millions of dollars and didn't work. So what makes you think that with a select committee, you're going to change something that was messed up and 2007.
And this committee may not change the world, but if we can make a small difference, I'll call it a success. And frankly, I think the complexity of the technology platforms that we use and the ways that Minnesotans interact with state government through technology is so complex, and it's so varied from all of the different departments. We wanted to put a committee in place that could really look at that from a higher level, and give a more of a higher level overview and recommendations on what can be done. What we may find come out of this committee would be higher level recommendations then that would be forwarded to other committees where they can dig in a little deeper and say, okay, these are the overarching problems that were, uncovered, and here's some examples of what direction to go. How then do we implement that on a smaller basis? And so that's the kind of direction that I could see this going.
Mr. Speaker, you and the leader kind of alluded to this on the issue of counties and some of their responsibilities. Is there an advantage, as you see it, in consolidating some of these functions at the state level and pulling them from the counties?
Well, we think, I don't know about pulling them from the counties, but I hear a lot. I mean, I spent 6 years as a county commissioner. I hear a lot from counties about how antiquated the computer systems are and how much time it takes to process a particular case for a citizen. I think those are, the way I look at them, and I'm a glass half full sort of guy, those are real opportunities for us to do things better, to do things more efficiently, more effectively. I think there are a lot of unfunded or underfunded mandates that we put on county government and others as well, and then we don't give them the tools to, and it's almost technology that's causing that problem. So hopefully if we could improve that process using newer technology and stuff that's out there. Other states are doing this, and other states, there's great examples. I think that's some of what this committee will do, is look at what great things have other states done using technology to improve the customer service that we provide to our citizens. That's exactly the kind of thing we want this committee doing.
Is there a particular area in state government that you're particularly keen to focus on to get started? Is it DNR? Is it social services? Is it this county connection? What might it be that you really want to start?
We have a few ideas, but we really want the committee to look at and chart its own course. So the instruction that I've given to the chairman is first of all, figure out, do a little research and figure out where the most impactful interactions are with Minnesotans. We think that county level stuff is an important one, but we need to reach out to a lot of folks that have information on that, stakeholders, whether it be the counties or others. On that particular issue, it's the counties, and get their input. How can we do a better job of providing the services we provide to Minnesotans? How can we do it more effectively? How can we do it more efficiently? And how can we use technology to make that happen? And what are other states doing successfully, and what have they done that we can learn from? And what mistakes have they made so we can avoid those as well? That's really the scope of this committee. But we're not giving, I mean, I have some ideas, but I don't want to tell them, you're stuck in this lane. We really want to, the goal of the committee would be to find the areas in state government where we have the most interactions with citizens and the areas where we aren't doing it as well as we could. And those are the areas we'll target first for taking action.
Is there something specific, you've mentioned other states, is there something specific that you've seen someplace else you think this works really well and this is definitely worth looking at?
We've looked at a lot of things. I know that in Indiana they did some of this a few years ago, and they focused on some of the driver's license stuff because that was a frustration for citizens. But we don't want it to just to be we don't want this to be a make-work committee or just for PR. I really, and we look at this as a longer range thing. We may not see stuff come out of this committee this year that says we are going to make this change and it's going to, cut half of your time at, when you interact with state government. I would love for that to happen, but we want to be realistic. And too often in the House, because of our 2-year elections and our 2-year budget cycles, we don't look beyond that 2-year period. And frankly, for these sorts of things, you need to have a vision beyond 2 years. So that's why we want to just not miss an opportunity right now to start thinking about what can we do to improve how we provide services to Minnesotans. So Indiana is one. I think Illinois actually is going through a similar thing right now. I don't know the specifics of what they're doing, but there are some good examples out there.
Following up on her earlier question, do you think that, I think it's $125 million is what the governor says we need to spend to keep up with cyber threats. Do you think that large of an investment is necessary? I mean, it's related to a lot of the things you're talking about.
Well, I can't say that it is until our committees have looked at whether it's needed. I was joking to a group that I spoke to this morning that never once have I seen a request for funding come in that says, you know, we need $120 million. Oh, and by the way, if we do this, this other service that we do is obsolete, so we can reduce our budget over here by $20 million. It's always how much more money do we need, and we never find the efficiencies. We never replace obsolete things, so you know, I just want to make sure that what they're requesting is what we really need and see how it fits in across the broad spectrum of all of the computer programs or computer systems that we have at the state of Minnesota. So I can't for sure say that our caucus is behind that sort of an expenditure. We will, through hearings, you know, in the coming weeks, determine whether that's necessary and how much of it might be necessary. But we understand there is a problem, and the state does have potential liabilities and you know, potential weaknesses in our computer infrastructure. And we need to make sure that we're protecting Minnesotans' data and handling that in the utmost careful way.
These kinds of customer-facing improvements take precedent over that kind of back-end mainframe upgrades and cybersecurity, or are they completely separate?
Would this take precedent over?
Should the work of this committee and whatever you may recommend take precedent?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say that this should take precedent or that should take precedent. I think in the normal way that we have operated in St. Paul, we run from brush fire to brush fire, emergency to emergency. And we need $20 million right now to do this because it's an important emergency. And because of that, we don't often look at, from the customer's perspective, how can we improve that process to improve the interaction that they have with state government. So one of the main challenges that I have challenged our new committee chair here with is to really look at the services and the technology in the state of Minnesota through the eyes of a Minnesotan, through the eyes of a customer. And let's work on improving the process and the way that they interact with state government. And through that, we will find efficiencies. Through that, using technology, we will be able to operate state government less expensive than we do now. That's what's going on in the private sector. They're using technology to run more efficiently. But I don't want to do that just to be more efficient. I also think we've got a great opportunity to be more effective. And that's what this is about.
That are willing to come in here and start doing some of this work?
Well, we've had some conversations with them. I think I have seen a concerning trend in the past, you know, so many years here in Minnesota that we don't go to an outside vendor to look at a commercially available product, that we often want to bring it in-house, write our own software, and you know, we've had some big problems with that. You know, so this committee will look into that, and we can, you know, hopefully. I would assume there are some out there. We have not had specific conversation with vendors that want to come in and do that sort of work. But I know that other states are doing that, and I think running it more efficiently than we are.
That concern, I mean, MNsure actually was done by outside vendors with inside help. You know, Minlar's had outside contracts, the Polenti healthcare system was done by outside contracts. So which programs are you talking about that were done in state?
In each instance, I think they were reinventing the wheel, rather than using what was maybe more commonly used by others. You know, I don't think we need to recreate the wheel. There are other states that are doing some of this stuff really well. The vendor that they used for the MNsure system, you know, there obviously were big problems. There were a few other people that were a partner in that early on. They all jumped out. I think we were the only holdouts that were still using that vendor for that service. Everybody else was using someone else. It was a...
In-house, so those were examples of hiring outside vendors.
Well,
Do you have a specific
I think
example?
I think they used vendors to a certain extent, but they also do a lot of that work themselves at Minute. When I think there's a more complete package potentially available out there, and that's what we're going to challenge this committee to do. Let's look at what other states are doing well. Who's doing it better than we are? Who's doing it more efficiently? The great thing for us is we've got 49 other states that are you know, providing these same sorts of services to their constituents. Let's look at who's doing it better than we are. And I don't care how good you are. I'm somebody that thinks you always can improve. We can always do things better. And I think we owe it to Minnesotans to do that, to always be looking for a better, more efficient, more effective way of providing the services that we provide. So that's our challenge.
You talk about a select committee. Who is among the selected that is going to be on the committee?
We have not appointed our committee members yet. I think we're going to have 10 committee members. We'll likely have 6 from our side and 4 from the other side. We're going to reach out to... We're going to have lawmakers. It's a House committee, obviously, but we want, I assume that pretty much everyone that comes in and testifies is going to either be a citizen or an expert in, some of the services that we'll be talking about. So we'll obviously be engaging the public through this committee. And that's why we wanted to make it a committee, so that in a very transparent, public way, we can have hearings, kind of high-level overview on the services that we provide, and engage people to come in and give us examples of what, we may be bringing in people from other states that are doing things better than we are, to kind of share with us the examples of what they have done and how we can improve. So those are the kinds of things we likely will do.
The weeds here, probably way too much, but what was the thought process of making this a select committee as opposed to a task force where you can have people sitting at the table who are from industries and other walks of life professionally and IT-wise to contribute to the conversation?
We wanted to get the ball rolling, frankly, and this is the direction that we chose to go. Hopefully this will help us, at least get started in making an impact in the services we provide to Minnesotans. Like I said, it may take some time to make this improvement, but I also think in other committees, as they're looking at really specifics, they can bounce something up to this committee and say, hey, we're running short on committee time, or can you look into this issue? And we don't understand how this issue interacts with maybe another department or another agency. Can you look at that, do a hearing on that, and then kind of give us a little recommendation? It's a very public way of doing it. In the past, we have very often just kind of had those conversations behind the scenes, and the public and the press weren't privy to what the experts maybe were telling committee chairs. Now we can do that in public, and this should give us more time and a better platform to do that.
In that regard with the schedule, do you expect this committee to report back with recommendations and legislative action yet this session, or is this aiming for the 2018 session and beyond?
Ultimately, that would be my hope, that they could come back with some deliverables that we could, or some recommendations for deliverables that we could implement this year. I don't want to be too aggressive. I don't want to put too much pressure on them and set expectations to a point. This really is going to take more than one budget cycle to really make a big impact. My hope is that this would become part of how we operate here in St. Paul, and can always constantly be looking at how can we improve those services and using technology to do it. So while we would hope for deliverables this year, I think it's probably more likely we'll see recommendations for things that can be implemented maybe next year.
So if you were governor in 2018 or 2019, would you take up any recommendations this committee comes up with?
Well, I would say I would be a little critical of the current administration right now, in that they haven't, the governor has been in for 6 years, and he hasn't really spearheaded an effort like this to make government run more efficiently and using technology to do it. I think that's a missed opportunity from the perspective of our current administration. So, my hope is that the current administration will implement the ideas that come out of this committee. No, they will be next year. I said my hope is we'll have some ready for next year. So my hope is the current administration will participate, will want to be part of this. We've heard positive feedback from them on this thus far. This is intended to just make sure that we're doing a better job as state government, not as Republicans, not as Democrats, but just across the board doing a better job. So, my hope is that they will start to implement these things, and whoever takes over as governor next will continue that. And we're going to work with whoever either of those are. So.
What's the plan for Real ID? When's that vote?
We don't have that set yet. My guess is the next couple of weeks, but I don't know the specifics on what we're thinking about.
I thought you wanted to do that in January. Now, is it not in it?
I did, but I also wanted to do the healthcare relief stuff on the first day of session, and that got pushed out to the third week in January. So that pushed everything back, frankly. And we said very, very earnestly at the beginning that our number 1 priority was House File 1 and Senate File 1, and making sure that we were providing the needed relief to Minnesotans who were negatively impacted by Obamacare and by MNsure here in Minnesota. So that took a little longer, and ultimately I think we got to a really good product, and I'm very happy with it. but it took longer, so it pushed out some of these other things a couple of weeks probably.
And are you still thinking next week for action on Sunday sales, post Super Bowl?
Likely.
Okay, you want to talk
I
a
would
little
look
bit
for
more
it
about
next
that?
week. I know there's a big event coming up this weekend on Sunday that folks, just want to remind them you won't be able to buy beer on Sunday yet, so make your plans on Saturday to do that. Plan ahead, and we'll, hopefully by next year when the Super Bowl is here in Minnesota, they will be able to buy beer on Sunday.
Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Any thoughts on, I think it's, I don't know if it's Gruffo's legislation or someone's carrying legislation to try to rein in the cities from enacting their own work regulations and wage regulations. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, I think the bill calls it uniform state labor standards. I think that sets an even playing field for everybody statewide. We do support that. We think it's important for businesses to thrive in the state of Minnesota, and we need that so that they can grow and hire more people and increase their wages for Minnesotans. The more red tape that we make businesses go through, the more difficult it is for them, and the more businesses that choose not to either expand here or relocate here. So we think it's a fair thing. It levels the playing field for businesses all over the state. I mean, there's some examples. A member of mine from St. Cloud was telling me about a delivery firm in St. Cloud that delivers all over the state of Minnesota, and they would have to track how many hours their employees were in a specific city, because if they met that threshold, they would then have to offer a different benefit set. All of that is an extra administrative hoops to jump through, and it costs those businesses money. And ultimately, that expense gets passed on to Minnesotans. So we feel that we should have a uniform set of labor standards statewide. We think that offers a level playing field for everyone in the state, and adds some consistency and predictability to running a business here in the state of Minnesota. We think it's important.
Why do you think that the state's role ought to be in the debate over sanctuary cities and the Trump administration?
Obviously, there's we've got a lot of things that we're working on here in the state, and frankly, we're focused on those issues. We'll let the federal government fight with cities if they want to right now. We're focused on the health care and finding the long-term solutions that'll provide the stability to that marketplace and many other things. This isn't something we've been working on, I think,
I
much
forget
ago.
the members come next week, so if you want to have additional questions, we can set up time offline. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Yep.